What would you do if your entire civilization asked for shelter, and the species you feared most arrived not as refugees, but as saviors? What would you feel if the beings you called dangerous became the only reason your people survived? Before we enter this story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who enjoys stories where humanity stands tall when the universe falls silent. The Thari Council Chamber was never meant to hold fear. For 30,000 years, that chamber had been a place of peace. Its walls glowed with soft silver light. Its ceiling showed the stars of the Dominion, not as territory to conquer, but as homes to protect. Every chair, every crystal panel, every ancient carving had been designed to remind the Thari that they were a calm and civilized people. They had built their society on patience. They had chosen diplomacy over violence. They had turned war into a subject for schools, museums, and old history archives. But now, inside that perfect chamber, peace felt like a dead language. High Counselor Tivar stood before the great central display and watched the end of another world. Vither 9 had once been beautiful. Its cities had risen like glass trees from blue forests. Its rivers had been wide and clean. Its people had lived under bright moons and gentle weather. Now those cities were broken. The forests were burning. The rivers had turned black. The display showed towers falling in slow silence while thousands of emergency signals blinked and vanished one by one. Admiral Kell stood beside the display, his uniform scorched from a battle he had barely escaped. His voice was low when he spoke. The swarm will reach the inner systems within 40 cycles. Nobody answered. The words were too large for the room. Kell continued because someone had to say the rest. We have lost 14 colony worlds. Our defensive fleets are below half strength. 2 billion citizens have already been displaced. Another 3 billion are trapped in evacuation lanes. Some corridors are collapsing faster than we can reinforce them. A sound moved through the chamber. It was not a cry. It was not a gasp. It was the sound of an entire government realizing that its history might be ending. Tivar closed his eyes for one moment. He was old enough to remember when the swarm had first appeared at the edge of Dominion space. At first, the Thari had called it a border disturbance. Then they called it a hostile migration. Then an invasion. Then a disaster. After 200 cycles, they had stopped naming it. The swarm simply came. It did not speak. It did not bargain. It did not threaten. It consumed. Counselor Mevra leaned forward, her voice shaking. There is one option left. Several council members looked at her with immediate fear. Tivar already knew what she meant. The emergency contact protocol, she said. A heavy silence followed. That protocol had been written during the founding of the Dominion. It was old, almost forgotten, and deeply uncomfortable. It allowed the Council to seek aid from any species, even those marked as unstable, dangerous, or hostile, if the Dominion faced extinction. Councillor Jex rose from his seat. No. The word cut through the room. We are not speaking to them. Mevra turned toward him. We may not have another choice. Jex pointed at the blue planet now forming on the display. Earth. Small, wet, bright, and disturbingly alive. The world of humanity. They are violent, Jex said. They fight each other constantly. Their records show wars, broken governments, mass killing, poisoned environments, and weapons used against their own kind. They have had interstellar flight for only 6 generations, and in that time they have spread across 200 systems. That is not growth. That is a warning. Admiral Kell looked at Earth with tired eyes. They also advanced faster than any species in our records. They adapt faster than the swarm. They build under pressure. They fight even when outmatched. That is exactly the problem, Jex snapped. What happens if we invite them into our space and they decide they like it? What happens after the swarm is defeated? What stops them from turning their weapons on us? Tivar opened his eyes. For a moment, he watched Earth rotate quietly on the display. Humanity. The species every serious Pthari diplomat had studied with unease. Humans had no single world government for most of their history. Even after reaching the stars, their unity remained strange. They argued, competed, broke alliances, formed new ones, and kept pushing outward as if the universe itself had challenged them. They were emotional, unpredictable, brilliant, terrifying. And maybe, just maybe, exactly what the Pthari needed. Tivar lifted one hand. The chamber fell silent. If we do nothing, he said, we die. No one moved. If we contact humanity and they refuse, we die. If they come and betray us later, then we will at least have bought time for our children. But if we choose pride now, if we choose fear now, then we die with clean hands while our worlds burn. He looked around the chamber. I will not let that be the final act of my people. His voice grew stronger. Send the message. The transmission left Vither Prime 3 cycles later. It was carefully written. The Pthari offered resources, technology, and alliance. They asked for evacuation support. They asked for shelter. They asked humanity to receive refugees if Dominion space collapsed. No one expected a quick answer. Human space was far. Their communication systems were crude by Dominion standards. The Council prepared itself for delay, debate, and maybe rejection. The answer arrived 7 cycles later. One line. Simple. Clear. Almost frightening. We are coming. Tivar read the message 3 times. No demands. No conditions. No long diplomatic statement. Just those 3 words. We are coming. 3 cycles after that, a single human ship emerged above Vither Prime. It was smaller than expected. Clean. White. Smooth. Almost gentle. Pthari scans showed no major weapons. It carried 7 humans, 1 diplomatic crew, and no visible threat. Councillor Jex looked relieved. They have come to negotiate. Admiral Kell did not look relieved. He stared at the ship as if it were the first stone before an avalanche. The human delegation arrived inside the orbital reception platform. Their leader walked with calm steps, wearing a dark formal suit with a small silver emblem at her shoulder. Ambassador Teresa Vance. She was short compared to the Pthari. Her skin looked soft. Her body had no claws, no armor plates, no visible defensive features. Yet her eyes made Tivar uneasy. They were steady, sharp, and far too alive. She stopped before him and smiled. High Counselor Tivar, she said through the translator. On behalf of the United Human Systems, we accept your request for refuge. Tivar lowered his head in respect. We are grateful for your response. We have prepared outer sanctuary worlds for your ships and your people. We know this request places a burden on your civilization. Ambassador Vance raised one hand gently. I think there has been a misunderstanding. Tivar froze. Jex's scales shifted with alarm. Vance continued. When we received your message, we analyzed the situation. The swarm is not a storm you can hide from. It will find your sanctuary worlds. It will consume them. Then it will keep moving until it finds us too. Her expression changed. The smile remained, but something hard appeared beneath it. Humanity does not hide from threats, Counselor. She stepped closer. We end them. At that exact moment, every alarm in the chamber began to scream. The main display flashed red. Admiral Kell turned toward it, then stopped moving. Ships were appearing over Vither Prime. Not 1. Not 10. Hundreds. They emerged from fold space in perfect sequence, each vessel taking position like pieces of a weapon being assembled in the dark. Some were long and angular. Some were heavy and black, covered in armor. Others were smaller, fast-moving escorts. Behind them came massive structures larger than any Dominion industrial station. Tivar stared in disbelief. Those are not refugee ships. Ambassador Vance looked at the display. No. Her voice was calm. They are not. The human fleet continued to arrive. Warships. Command ships. Carrier vessels. Engineering platforms. Mobile foundries. Medical ships. Supply stations. The sky above Vether Prime filled with humanity. Vance turned back to the council. You asked for refuge, she said. We brought generals, engineers, and warships. No one spoke. Then she said the words that would later be written on monuments across the Dominion. We do not abandon people who ask for help. Tivar watched the human ship spread across his world's orbit with impossible discipline. For the first time in 200 cycles, he felt something dangerous. Hope. Admiral Kell hated the human ships at first. That was the honest truth. They offended every Thari instinct for beauty. Dominion vessels were graceful. Their curves were mathematical, their hulls polished, their engines integrated like natural organs. A Thari ship looked like it belonged among the stars. Human ships looked like they had been built by people who expected the stars to punch back. They were ugly. Angular. Brutal. Every surface had a purpose. Every plate was armored. Every tower, trench, and spine carried sensors or weapons or shield emitters. The humans had not asked how a warship should look. They had asked what it needed to survive. Kell stood inside the observation dome of the Military Command Center and watched 347 human vessels settle into orbit. Ambassador Vance stood beside him. She had become impossible to ignore. Wherever she went, human officers followed. Wherever she spoke, Thari commanders listened, even when they did not want to. Kell pointed toward 5 enormous structures taking position around the fleet. What are those? Engineering platforms, Vance said. Each one carries manufacturing capacity equal to your largest orbital yard. Kell turned to her. You brought shipyards to a war zone. Of course. You build ships during combat. When needed. You repair them while fighting. That is the idea. Kell stared at her. Vance moved to the tactical display and brought up a rotating image of one platform. Its outer rings were lined with fabrication bays. Its center contained reactors, material processors, weapon assembly systems, and entire repair docks. We call it mobile fleet support, she said. If a ship is damaged, we patch it. If a ship is lost, we replace key parts. If we need a new tool, we build it. A new tool, Kell repeated. The phrase felt too small for what he was seeing. Vance opened another file. A massive defensive structure appeared. This is a barrier array. We place it between the swarm and a civilian evacuation route. It produces a kinetic shield strong enough to hold against mass assault for a limited time. Kell leaned closer. How many do you have? 6 in production. 2 ready. How long to build one? 5 cycles if the parts behave. 3 if we are desperate. Kell's mandibles clicked in disbelief. The Dominion had taken 30 cycles to build a single military orbital shield. Humans treated miracles like workshop tasks. Vance noticed his expression. Admiral, your people have been fighting while retreating. That changes how you think. You protect what remains. You conserve. You fear risk. And humans do not fear risk. Vance looked at him. We fear it. We just do not worship it. That answer stayed with Kell longer than he wanted to admit. A junior officer approached and bowed. Ambassador, General Thorne is requesting access to all combat recordings from Vether 7, Vether 9, and the Western Evacuation Corridor. Kell stiffened. General Thorne is already reviewing our military records. He has been for 3 cycles, Vance said. 3 cycles. He only arrived today. No. His data teams arrived first. Kell slowly turned toward her. Without authorization. Vance did not blink. Your transmission included an emergency request for military assistance. We treated that as permission to begin threat analysis. Kel wanted to be angry. He truly did. But the display changed before he could speak. It showed Vether 9. The dead colony. Except it was not entirely dead. Human ground units had landed on the burning surface. They had built defensive walls around an evacuation zone. Refugee transports were lifting off under fighter escort. Swarm vessels circled overhead, but human artillery fire kept tearing them apart before they could descend. Kel felt his legs weaken. You went to Vether 9? Yes. That world was lost. Not completely. The swarm controls the orbit. Not anymore. Kel could barely speak. Why? Vance's answer was quiet. Because there were people still alive. That was all. No strategy. No politics. No grand speech. There were people still alive. So humanity went. Kel turned back to the display. He watched a human dropship land beside a broken Thari school. Soldiers ran into the smoke. Moments later, they came out carrying children. Small Thari children. Covered in ash. Alive. Kel had ordered that colony abandoned because saving it had seemed impossible. Humans had looked at the same impossible situation and sent rescue teams. Vance spoke again. The swarm is predictable. It attacks in waves. It follows pressure. It pulls back when losses rise above a certain point. Your commanders were looking at it as a horror. Our analysts looked at it as a system. Kel's pride burned. We have studied the swarm for 200 cycles. I know. Our best predictions succeed 20% of the time. Human models are currently at 73%. Kel stared. Impossible. Vance's mouth curved slightly. Admiral, humans have spent thousands of years studying enemies. Sometimes those enemies were other nations. Sometimes other armies. Sometimes hunger, disease, weather, oceans, gravity, ourselves. We do not only observe danger. We enter its logic. We ask what it wants. We ask what it fears. We ask what pattern it cannot stop repeating. Her voice lowered. Then we break the pattern. Kel looked at the human fleet again. Their formations were strange. Too close together. Too dense. At first glance, they looked vulnerable. Then he noticed the shield overlaps. Each vessel covered another. Every firing angle supported 3 others. Even their weakness was bait. They are coming, Kel said. The swarm will throw everything at you. Vance nodded. Good. That single word chilled him. You want them to come? Yes. Why? Because if they come to us, they stop chasing civilians. For the first time, Kel understood something about humanity that no file had explained properly. Humans were not fearless. They simply placed fear beneath duty. General Erasmus Thorne arrived at the command center 12 hours later. He was tall for a human, older than Vance, with gray hair cut short and eyes that did not waste movement. He studied every room he entered like it might become a battlefield. His uniform was plain. No bright metals. No theatrical armor. Just a small command insignia and a posture of someone who had made too many hard choices to enjoy ceremony. Kel disliked him immediately. Then respected him 5 minutes later. Thorne stood before the tactical display and watched the fall of Vether 7 from beginning to end without speaking. The recording showed swarm vessels moving like living knives through space. They twisted around defensive fire, folded through blind spots, and struck the weakest sections of the Dominion line. Thari ships fought bravely, but their formation collapsed after only 9 minutes. When the recording ended, Thorne looked at his analysts. Pattern recognition. A young human officer answered. 83% consistent across the last 19 major engagements. Same approach rhythm. Same pressure behavior. Same regroup timing. They adapt, but slowly. How slowly? Average 12 engagements before they fully change response. Thorne nodded. Good. Then we have room to teach them the wrong lesson. Kel's mandibles tightened. Teach them. Thorne turned to him. Every enemy learns. You can either let them learn the truth, or you can feed them a lie. Kel stared at him. It was a deeply human sentence. Cruel, practical, and brilliant. Thorne pointed to the display. Your fleets have been trying to destroy swarm ships one by one. That is not enough. The swarm does not care about losing pieces. It cares about motion, pressure, and feeding. We need to make it hesitate. The swarm does not hesitate. Everything hesitates when it is hurt in the right place. It is not a creature in that sense. Thorne's face did not change. It reacts. It adapts. It chooses. That means something guides it. Kel felt a cold pressure in his chest. We have never found a command center. Because you looked for a center. Thorne moved his hand across the display. A star chart appeared, covered in retreat paths, attack angles, signal fragments, and gravity records. We looked for a habit. A red region lit up inside the Cygnus Nebula. Kel went still. No. Thorne looked at him. Yes. The Cygnus Nebula is lethal. Radiation storms. Gravity breaks. Sensor distortion. We have lost probes there. We lost some too. You sent probes already? Yes. When? Before our main fleet arrived. Kel felt anger rise, then die under the weight of what appeared next. An image. Deep inside the nebula, orbiting a dead star, stood a massive structure. It was not a planet. Not a station the Thari had ever seen. It was a corpse of metal and organic growth, 600 kilometers wide, wrapped in the same living matter that covered swarm vessels. Kel could not breathe. What is that? The source, Thorne said. We searched for 200 cycles. You searched for a home world. And you did not. No. Thorne's eyes remained on the structure. We searched for a weapon factory. The room seemed to shrink. A weapon, Kel whispered. Thorne nodded. The swarm was made. It is not natural. Something created it, or controlled it, or both. That structure is where the trail leads. Kel looked at the image. 200 cycles of death. 14 lost colonies. Billions displaced. Generations raised under evacuation drills. All because of that thing. What do you plan to do? Thorne answered as if the question were simple. Destroy it. Before the story moves deeper, stay with us by pressing like, subscribing, and sharing this video. Stories like this travel farther when good listeners carry them forward. The first Joint War Council took place aboard the human flagship Resolute Dawn. Kel had expected chaos. Humanity, after all, had a reputation for argument. Their political history was full of divided councils, rival blocs, loud debates, and emotional speeches. He expected their officers to interrupt each other. He expected disorder dressed as confidence. Instead, he found precision. The command chamber was large, dark, and full of quiet voices. Human officers stood at stations beside Thari commanders. Translation systems floated above the room, turning clicks, tones, and human words into clear meaning. Every display showed the same target. The source structure inside the Cygnus Nebula. General Thorne stood in the center. The plan is direct, he said. Kel almost laughed at the word direct. Only humans would call an attack into a lethal nebula against the source of a galactic swarm direct. Thorne continued. We use a diversionary fleet at the outer edge. The swarm will respond en masse because it protects the structure. While they commit to the diversion, the main fleet enters through the eastern current. Thari ships guard the rear and flank. Human heavy vessels escort the engineering platforms. The platforms breach the shield. Then we hit the core until the structure stops existing. A Thari captain raised her voice. The diversion fleet will be destroyed. Possibly, Thorn said. Not possibly. Certainly. Thorn looked at her. Every human ship in that force is crewed by volunteers. The Thari officers shifted uneasily. Kel spoke. You have people who volunteer for certain death. Thorn's answer was calm. We have people who understand that some things are worth dying for. No one liked that answer. But no one could dismiss it either. Thari military doctrine placed survival at the center of command. Preserve ships. Preserve crews. Preserve continuity. Every life mattered because every life belonged to the Dominion. Human doctrine seemed different. Humans did not value life less. That was the unsettling part. They seemed to value it so much that they were willing to spend their own to protect others. Thorn gestured to the map. The diversion does not need to die. It needs to hold long enough. If it survives, we pull it back. If it does not, then its sacrifice opens the door. Kel heard a murmur among his officers. Sacrifice. The word had existed in Thari language, but it belonged to ancient myths, not modern strategy. The briefing continued for hours. The humans had prepared for everything. If the swarm refused the bait, there was a second trigger. If the nebula currents shifted, there were 3 alternate routes. If the shield breach failed, the engineering platforms had 2 different prototype systems. If the main fleet became trapped, the Thari rear guard would open an exit corridor. If the source structure moved, human scout drones would tag its drive signatures. Kel found himself growing quieter as the plan unfolded. This was not reckless courage. This was disciplined madness. The humans were willing to risk everything, but they did not gamble blindly. They studied, prepared, adjusted, argued with their own assumptions, and turned uncertainty into layers of possible action. After the council ended, Kel found Thorn alone near the main display. The human general was staring at the source structure. Kel approached slowly. General. Thorn did not turn. Admiral. I need to ask something. Ask. Why are you truly doing this? Thorn looked at him then. Kel continued. Your people could take our refugees and leave. You could fortify your own space. You could let the swarm spend itself against us while you prepare. That would be logical. Yes. But you did not choose that. No. Why? For the first time, Thorn looked tired. Because logic without conscience is just cowardice with better language. Kel did not know how to answer. Thorn turned back to the display. When your message reached Earth, some leaders said what you just said. Take refugees. Secure our borders. Delay direct involvement. Use the time. Protect our own. And you disagreed. Many of us did. Why? Because eventually, there is no such thing as someone else's extinction. The room was quiet around them. Thorn's voice softened. We have made terrible mistakes, Admiral. Humans have hurt each other in ways that still shame us. We built weapons we should never have built. We burned cities. We broke worlds. We failed ourselves more times than I can count. He looked at Kel. But we also learned something from all that pain. When a people cry for help and you are able to answer, you answer. Not because it is safe. Not because it profits you. Because the moment you stop answering, you become something smaller than human. Kel felt those words settle inside him. Your history made you dangerous, he said. Yes. And kind. Sometimes. That is a strange combination. Thorn almost smiled. It has confused us too. Kel looked at the source structure. You believe you can win. I do. Why? Because the swarm was built to defeat civilizations that behave predictably. Retreat, defend, negotiate, collapse. Humans are very bad at staying predictable. That was the first time Kel felt real confidence. Not comfort. Not peace. Confidence. And it frightened him because it felt like standing beside a storm and realizing the storm was on your side. Chief Engineer Helena Richter had not slept in 2 days. This did not appear to concern her. It concerned everyone else. The engineering platform Forge 3 was a thunderstorm of work. Fabrication arms moved across open bays. Plasma cutters burned. Drones carried hull plates, shield coils, reactor parts, and strange human materials that the Thari technicians did not recognize. Richter stood in the middle of it all, drinking dark liquid from a metal cup and arguing with 6 displays at once. Young Thari engineer Jekyll watched her with growing horror. "Chief Richter," he said carefully. She did not look up. "Yes. You have been awake for 41 hours. 43. That is worse. Only if the math is your enemy." Jekyll blinked. "I do not understand." "Good. Means the translator is working." She tapped the screen and enlarged a model of the source structure's shield. Jekyll tried to focus. The shield was unlike any system he had studied. It did not merely block attacks. It learned from them. Each hit made it better. Energy weapons strengthened its outer shell. Kinetic rounds were slowed, studied, and redirected. Explosives were dispersed. Particle streams were swallowed. The Thari had fired everything at swarm shields for 200 cycles. Each failure had made the enemy stronger. Richter pointed at the model. "Your problem is that you kept treating the shield like a wall." "It is a wall." "No. A wall just stands there. This thing eats information." Jekyll leaned closer. "Then how do we break it?" "We do not break it." He stared. "We lie to it." Richter opened another file. A thin projectile appeared. It looked plain. Almost boring. "This is the carrier." Jekyll waited. Nothing about the image inspired confidence. "It looks small," he said. "It is. And this will defeat the shield. If it behaves." "If it behaves?" Richter smiled. Jekyll had learned that human engineers smiled most brightly when discussing something extremely dangerous. "The carrier is coated in adaptive alloy. To the shield, it should look like dead debris. Harmless. The shield absorbs it instead of rejecting it. Once inside the shield boundary, the alloy converts absorbed energy into a focused kinetic burst." Jekyll slowly understood. "You are using the shield's own energy to open a hole." "Exactly. That is insane. Only until it works. If it fails, we try again. If it explodes early, we stand farther away next time." Jekyll stared at her. Richter finally looked at him fully. "Listen, Jekyll. Your people built carefully because you had time once. Then the swarm stole that time, and you kept trying to build carefully inside a disaster. Humans do not do well with perfect conditions. We get bored. But give us a deadline, a threat, a box of parts, and a reason to care, and suddenly we become very useful." Jekyll looked around the platform. Human engineers worked beside Thari technicians now. At first, the cultural clash had been painful. Thari teams moved through formal review stages. Humans made 3 prototypes before the Thari finished naming the problem. Thari engineers checked for elegance. Human engineers asked whether it worked, whether it could be fixed, and whether it might explode in a direction that spared civilians. It was chaotic. It was loud. It was effective. Richter handed Jekyll a data slate. "Run the resonance check again." "I already ran it." "Run it again." "Because you do not trust me." "Because I trust physics to punish pride." Jekyll accepted the slate. That, he thought, was another deeply human sentence. The first test failed. The carrier absorbed too much energy and shattered into molten dust. The second test punched a hole in the simulation, then destabilized and destroyed the test rig. The third test worked for 3 seconds. Richter called that progress. By the fifth test, the carrier held long enough to open a clean breach. By the seventh, the breach lasted long enough for a capital ship volley. The Thari technicians erupted in stunned silence. Humans cheered, cursed, laughed, hugged, and immediately began improving it. Jekyll stood beside Richter while the fabrication team prepared for production. "How do you live like this?" he asked. "Like what?" "Failing so often." Richter took a sip from her cup. "Failure is just data with an attitude." Jekyll considered that. "My instructors taught me failure was shameful." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." Richter's expression softened. "Then learn something better from us. Failure is not the end unless you stop there. If something breaks, ask why. If the answer hurts, good. That means it matters. Then build again." Jekyll looked through the platform window at the human fleet beyond. "Your people are strange." "Absolutely. You are frightening. Often. You are also kind." Richter was quiet for a moment. "We try to be." Jekyll nodded toward the carrier weapon. "If this works, you will save my people." "No," Richter said. He turned to her. "We are not saving you. We are giving you a way to fight back." That distinction mattered. It changed something inside him. For 200 cycles, the Thari had asked how to survive. Humanity had asked how to win. And now the answer was being built in fire. The diversion fleet formed at the edge of the Cygnus Nebula like a challenge thrown into the face of death. 300 human warships held position in a loose crescent. To Thari eyes, the formation still looked wrong. Too open in some places, too dense in others. But Admiral Kell had learned not to judge human patterns too quickly. Every mistake might be a trap. He stood aboard the Resolute Dawn beside General Thorne. The main fleet waited in silence behind a belt of charged dust and broken light. Thari ships guarded the rear. Human carriers held the center. The engineering platforms rested under layers of escort protection, their prototype shield breaker ready. On the display, the source structure pulsed deep inside the nebula. Around it, the swarm began to move. The tactical officer spoke. "Enemy response detected. Large mass leaving inner nebula." Thorne asked, "How many?" "Initial estimate, 2,000 vessels." Kell's breath caught. 2,000. Thorne nodded. They took the bait. Kell watched the red mass spread across the screen. The diversion fleet looked tiny before it. Each human ship in that formation carried volunteers. Kell had reviewed the crew messages. Some had recorded farewells. Some had sent jokes to loved ones. Some had left simple statements of duty. None of them sounded forced. That disturbed him more than fear would have. "Hold main fleet," Thorne said. The tactical officer repeated the order. The wait began. The swarm approached the diversion force with terrible speed. No music played. No one gave speeches. The human bridge crew worked in calm rhythm, voices steady, hands moving across controls. Kell felt every second like a physical wound. "They are almost in range," a human officer said. Thorne did not blink. "Wait." Kell turned to him. "If we move now, we can support them. If we move now, the swarm splits early. They are about to be surrounded. That is their job." Kell hated him again for 1 second. Then the diversion fleet fired. Space became light. Human weapons tore into the swarm's front ranks. Rail rounds punched through living hulls. Missile clouds spread and bloomed. Laser batteries carved burning lines through organic armor. The swarm recoiled, then surged harder. The diversion fleet began to fall back, not in panic, but in pattern. It lured. It wounded. It mocked. The swarm committed more ships. Then more. Then nearly all. The tactical officer spoke. Swarm commitment at 86%. Thorne's jaw tightened. Wait. Ships began dying. A human destroyer vanished under a wave of swarm vessels, its final volley destroying 6 enemies before its signal disappeared. Another cruiser lost engines but kept firing. A carrier released all remaining drones, then turned itself into the path of a swarm advance to block it. Kell could not look away. Commitment 94%, the officer said. Thorne's voice came like a blade. Move. The main fleet entered the nebula. Engines flared. Shields tightened. Thari ships followed human guidance beacons through currents that had killed probes for generations. The nebula swallowed them in violet light and sensor noise. Gravity rippled against the hull. Radiation washed over the shields. Kell gripped the rail. The swarm noticed. 300 vessels breaking from diversion, the tactical officer reported. Thorne smiled faintly. Only 300. Good. Kell stared. Only. Admiral, after the last week, I have become hard to impress. Human escorts moved to intercept. They met the swarm in the nebula currents, where visibility collapsed and close combat became inevitable. Human pilots used the chaos-like terrain. They dipped through radiation pockets, used gravity eddies to slingshot behind enemy formations, and struck engines, nerve clusters, and weapon organs with brutal accuracy. Kell watched one small human frigate cut between 2 swarm vessels, spin in place, fire both side batteries, and escape through the wreckage before the explosions finished spreading. Your pilots are insane, he said. Thorne glanced at the display. Those are the cautious ones. Kell decided not to ask. The main fleet pushed deeper. The source structure came into visual range. Even through distortion, it was enormous. It hung near the dead star like a wound in space. Metal ribs rose beneath black organic growth. Lights moved along its surface like infected nerves. Around it, smaller swarm vessels clung like parasites waiting to be born. The shield shimmered around it. Beautiful. Perfect. Deadly. Engineering platform in position, an officer said. Thorne looked toward the communications station. Chief Richter. Her voice answered through the bridge speakers. Ready as we are going to get. Confidence level. Enough. That is not a number. You will like it better than the number. Thorne nodded slowly. Fire when aligned. Kell's hearts beat too fast. The platform rotated. The shield breaker loaded into its launch system. For a moment, all the battle noise seemed distant. Then the carrier fired. It crossed the space between fleet and structure like a silver needle. The source shield brightened. The carrier struck. And vanished. Kell waited. Nothing happened. The shield remained whole. A cold emptiness opened inside him. Then the shield began to glow. At first, it was a small point. Then a ring. Then a spreading line of white fire across the surface. The shield tried to absorb, study, and adapt. It was too late. The carrier released the stolen energy inward. A hole tore open in the shield. The bridge erupted in controlled chaos. Shield breach confirmed. Thorne stepped forward. All ships, fire through the breach. Target the core. The fleet answered. Human dreadnoughts fired first, their heavy guns shaking their own hulls. Thari ships followed, pouring elegant beams of blue energy into the opening. Missiles streaked through the gap. Rail rounds hammered the inner structure. The source convulsed. The swarm screamed. Not with sound. With signal. Every sensor spiked. Every display distorted. Kel felt the vibration through the deck like the universe itself had been struck. Internal explosions, the tactical officer reported. Core instability rising. Keep firing, Thorne said. The shield tried to close. Richter fired a second carrier. Then a third. Each one widened the wound. The structure began to break apart. Sections the size of cities tore free and burned in the nebula radiation. Swarm vessels around it lost coordination. Some crashed into the surface. Others fled in random directions. Kel felt tears rise before he understood what they were. 200 cycles. 200 cycles of retreat, loss, and funeral songs. And now the source was burning. It is over, he whispered. Thorne did not answer immediately. He watched the structure break with narrowed eyes. Then he said, "No. Not yet." As if the universe had heard him, the dying structure sent out a signal. Every screen went black. Then a voice filled the bridge. Ancient. Cold. Almost bored. Children of the stars, you have destroyed what you did not understand. Kel froze. Thorne's expression hardened. The voice continued. We created the swarm to preserve order. We created it to prevent aggressive species from spreading beyond control. We created it to protect the galaxy from itself. Kel's grief turned into horror. You created this, he whispered. The voice ignored him. War follows intelligence. Hunger follows expansion. Pride follows power. Civilizations rise, consume, and destroy. The swarm was mercy. The swarm was balance. Thorne stepped closer to the display. To prevent trillions from dying later. You do not get to decide that. We already did. The black screen filled with new shapes. Inside the broken source structure, something was waking. Massive ships emerged from hidden chambers. They were older than any Dominion design. Their hulls were dark gold and black stone, covered in symbols that made the translator fail. Each ship dwarfed a human battleship. The tactical officer's voice lost its calm. Energy readings are extreme. Their shields are beyond our penetration range. Kel stared at the display. The victory died in his chest. How many? 112 active. More signals rising. The ancient voice returned. We have observed humanity. We judged you dangerous. Your history confirms it. You are violent. Divided. Expansive. You are exactly what the swarm was made to stop. Thorne's eyes were cold. Then you should have studied us better. The voice paused. You cannot win. Thorne looked around the bridge. No one moved. No one begged. No one panicked. We have heard that before, he said. Here is a quiet reminder before the next turn in the story. If you are enjoying this journey, give the video a like, subscribe for more HFY stories, and share it with a friend who would stand with humanity in the dark. The ancient ships advanced through the ruined nebula like gods returning to punish insects. For one long moment, the coalition fleet did not move. Thari commanders stared at their displays, trying to understand what had happened. They had destroyed the source. They had shattered the shield. They had watched the swarm collapse. Victory had been close enough to touch. Then the makers of the nightmare had awakened. Admiral Kel heard reports from every channel. Enemy energy output rising. Shields beyond confirmed range. Main guns charging. More vessels emerging from structure remains. Swarm remnants scattering. The ancient ships moved slowly, but not because they were weak. They moved with the confidence of something that had never needed to hurry. General Thorne turned to Kel. Admiral, you can withdraw your fleet. Kel stared at him. What? Take your ships. Get your crews home. We can hold them long enough for you to escape. The word struck Kel harder than enemy fire. You would stay? Yes. To die. To delay them. That is death with extra language. Thorn almost smiled. Sometimes language needs manners. Kel looked through the display at the approaching ships. They were too large. Too powerful. Too ancient. Every instinct told him to run. For 200 cycles, the Thari had survived by retreating. One more retreat would be easy to justify. The Dominion needed its remaining fleet. Its people needed leaders. Its worlds needed defense. But another memory rose inside him. Human soldiers running into burning schools on Vether 9. Human engineers laughing at failure until failure surrendered. Human volunteers holding the swarm at the edge of the nebula. Ambassador Vance saying, "We do not abandon people who ask for help." Kel opened the fleet command channel. "This is Admiral Kel to all Thari vessels." His voice shook at first. Then steadied. "Humanity came when we called. They fought when we could not. They gave us back the belief that victory was possible. Now they stand before a greater threat, and they have offered us escape." He looked at Thorn. "We refuse." The bridge went silent. Kel continued. "For too long, we have survived by running. Today, we remember how to stand. All Thari ships, form on the human line. We fight together." The response came at once. One by one, Thari captains answered. "With you, Admiral. With humanity. For the Dominion. For the fallen colonies. For Vether 9. For every child they saved." Kel turned back to Thorn. "We are staying." Thorn studied him for a moment. Then nodded. "Good. Then let us get very difficult to kill." The human bridge came alive again. Fear remained, but it no longer ruled the room. Thorn faced the display. "Show me their formations." A tactical model formed. The ancient ships flew in a wide-layered column. Strong forward shields. Heavy core vessels at the center. Smaller escorts along the outer curve. "Slow," Thorn said. A human analyst nodded. "They are still waking up. Their systems are synchronizing. Full combat readiness estimated in 3 cycles. Then we hurt them before they remember how powerful they are." Kel spoke. "Our weapons cannot break their shields. Not directly." Thorn looked toward the engineering link. "Richter." The chief engineer appeared on screen. Her face was pale, streaked with grease, and bright with the terrible focus of a human given too little time. "I know," she said before he spoke. "Ancient ships. Big shields. Bad day. Options. We have been studying the source structure's materials. Their power systems use linked core resonance. If these ships use the same architecture, and I strongly suspect they do, a cascade pulse could overload connected shield nodes." Kel leaned forward. "Can you build it?" Richter laughed once. "I already started." Thorn asked, "How long?" 3 cycles. "That is too long." "Then stop time." "Can you make it 2?" "Not unless I remove safety limits." Thorn did not hesitate. "Remove them." Kel felt alarm. "Is that wise?" Richter answered from the screen. "Absolutely not." Thorn said, "Do it." The screen went dark. Kel turned to him. "You trust her?" "With my life." "She said it was not wise." "She is an engineer. That means she wants it known that reality was warned." The ancient ships opened fire. Their first volley crossed the distance in silent lines of white energy. A human cruiser at the forward edge took the hit. Its shields vanished instantly. The second beam cut through the hull. The ship broke apart. Kel's throat tightened. "One shot." Thorn's voice became iron. "Spread formation. Do not let them line up targets. All ships, evasive pattern Delta 9. Human ships scattered. Thari ships followed as best they could. The second volley missed more targets, but those it touched died quickly. The ancient weapons did not burn. They erased. Entire sections of armor disappeared as if removed from existence. Kel watched his own ships fall beside human vessels. There was no time to mourn. The fleet needed to survive 2 cycles. Then 1.5. Then 1. Richter's engineering platform became the center of the battlefield. Human and Thari ships formed a moving wall around it, taking shots meant for the platform. Fighters swarmed enemy targeting nodes. Frigates launched decoy clouds. Thari cruisers projected shield harmonics to distort incoming beams. It was not enough. The ancient ships kept advancing. A Thari battleship, the Luminous Path, moved in front of the platform just as 3 enemy beams fired. Its captain's last message was calm. "Tell our children we stood." Then the ship became light. Kel lowered his head. Thorn placed one hand on the command rail. Status. Engineering platform shield failing. Enemy line closing. Richter needs 8 more minutes. Thorn looked at the display. Then he made his decision. Transfer the cascade device to my ship. Kel turned sharply. No. Thorn did not look at him. Resolute Dawn can break through their outer line. You cannot survive that. Maybe not. General. Now Thorn looked at him. There was no drama in his face. No hunger for glory. Only certainty. Someone has to carry the weapon close enough. If we wait, the platform dies, the weapon dies, and the enemy reaches open space. If I go, the fleet has a chance. Kel felt rage rise inside him. You humans keep doing this. Doing what? Turning death into a tool. Thorn was quiet. Then he said, no. We turn choice into meaning. The words silenced Kel. Richter's voice came over the channel. General, the device is unstable. If deployed manually at close range, there is no return window. I understand. Do you? Helena. A pause. Then her voice changed. Yes, sir. Kel wanted to stop him. But he knew he could not. He had seen that look before, in humans who ran into fires, who held doomed lines, who volunteered for impossible missions. It was not a wish to die. It was a refusal to let others die in their place. Thorn turned to Kel. Admiral, when the pulse hits, their shields should collapse for a few minutes. Fire everything. Do not wait for confirmation. Kel's voice was low. And you? I will be busy. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kel extended his hand. A human gesture. Thorn took it. Thank you, Kel said. Thorn shook his head. Win first. Thank me later. The Resolute Dawn broke from formation. The flagship accelerated toward the ancient line with a speed that shook its own frame. Enemy beams turned toward it. Human escorts rushed to its sides. Thari ships followed, covering its approach. One by one, escorts died. But the flagship kept moving. Kel watched from his transferred command link aboard of Thari cruiser. Every meter of distance felt impossible. The ancient ships adjusted. Their shields flared. Their guns charged. Thorn's voice came over the fleet channel. All coalition vessels, this is General Thorn. It has been an honor. Then another voice cut in. Ambassador Vance. She was aboard a rear command ship, coordinating civilian evacuation lanes. Erasmus. For the first time, Thorn's voice softened. Teresa. Make it count. Always. The Resolute Dawn entered the enemy formation. The cascade device fired. At first, nothing changed. Then the nearest ancient ship flickered. Its shield bent inward. The next ship flickered. Then the next. A wave moved through the enemy line, jumping from shield node to shield node. White light turned red. Red turned black. Power cores overloaded inside ships that had slept for ages and awakened too slowly. The ancient voice returned. "What have you done?" Thorn answered once. "What humans do." The resolute dawn vanished in the center of a growing sun. The cascade spread. Shields collapsed across the ancient fleet. Kel could not speak. The tactical officer shouted. "Enemy shields are down." Kel forced himself to move. "All ships, fire." The coalition fired as one. Human weapons. Thari weapons. Everything. The ancient ships, suddenly naked, began to die. Their armor was strong, but not invincible. Their guns were mighty, but their formations were broken. Their arrogance had survived millennia. It did not survive humanity. A Thari cruiser cut open an enemy flank. A human dreadnought poured fire into the wound. Fighters swarmed exposed power nodes. Engineering platforms launched improvised missiles still hot from assembly. The ancient fleet burned. Some tried to retreat. Kel gave the order to pursue. Not out of cruelty. Out of memory. The swarm had never stopped. So neither would they. When the final ancient ship broke apart above the dead star, the nebula grew quiet. No one cheered at first. The cost was too visible. Wreckage drifted everywhere. Human ships. Thari ships. Swarm fragments. Ancient hulls. The remains of the resolute dawn were nowhere to be found. Then a single Thari captain spoke over the open channel. "For General Thorn." Another voice answered. "For the volunteers." Then another. "For Vether 9. For humanity. For the Dominion. For all of us." Across the fleet, damaged ships blinked their lights. Not celebration. Respect. Kel sat in silence, staring at the place where Thorn had disappeared. Ambassador Vance's face appeared on his screen. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "Admiral." Kel bowed his head. "I am sorry." "So am I. He saved us." Vance looked toward the wreckage. "No. He helped us win." Kel understood the correction. Humans did not want worship. They wanted partnership. They had not crossed the stars to become legends. They had come because someone asked for help. And when the darkness grew larger than expected, they stayed. The aftermath lasted longer than the battle. Wars do not end when the shooting stops. They end slowly, in repair docks, in hospital wards, in lists of missing names, in homes that receive messages no one wants to send. The Cygnus Nebula became a graveyard and a monument. Human and Thari rescue crews moved through the wreckage together. They pulled survivors from broken hulls. They recovered the dead where they could. They marked the places where ships had vanished completely. Chief Engineer Richter survived, though no one knew how. When Jekyll found her, she was sitting on the floor of Forge 3 with a bandaged arm, a cracked helmet, and a cup of cold coffee. "You are alive," he said. She looked up. "That seems to be the current theory." "You removed safety limits from a cascade weapon." "Yes." "You nearly destroyed your own platform." "Also yes." "You are impossible." "Not the worst thing I have been called." Jekyll sat beside her. For a while, they said nothing. Then he asked, "Did you know General Thorn well?" Richter stared into her cup. "Well enough." "I am sorry." She nodded. He would have hated all this silence. What would he have wanted? Work. Jekyll looked at her. She stood slowly, wincing. Ships need fixing. People need getting home. The dead need honoring. The living need something useful to do. Now. Especially now. So they worked. The human platforms became hospitals, repair yards, shelters, and memorial sites. Thari medical teams learned human emergency methods. Human doctors learned Thari biology at frightening speed. Engineers from both species rebuilt ships using parts that should never have fit together, then made them fit anyway. Ambassador Vance traveled from ship to ship. She spoke with grieving crews. She recorded names. She stood beside Thari families as they received news of lost relatives. She attended human funerals and Thari remembrance circles with the same quiet respect. High Counselor Tivar arrived 3 days after the battle. His transport moved through fields of wreckage until it reached the central memorial platform. There, survivors from both species had gathered. No grand palace. No perfect chamber. Just a temporary platform floating above the dead star, surrounded by broken ships and silent lights. Tivar stood before them all. For a long moment, he could not speak. Then he turned toward the human delegation. When we contacted humanity, we asked for refuge. His voice carried through every open channel. We believed we were asking a dangerous species to shelter our people. We feared your violence. We feared your ambition. We feared what might happen if we let you into our space. He looked toward the wreckage. We were wrong in some ways, and right in others. A soft ripple moved through the crowd. Tivar continued. Humanity is dangerous. Let no one pretend otherwise. You are dangerous to enemies who think cruelty is order. You are dangerous to tyrants who call murder mercy. You are dangerous to every force that believes good people will always retreat. His voice grew stronger. But you are also generous. Brilliant. Stubborn. Loyal beyond reason. You came with generals, engineers, and warships, but you brought more than weapons. You brought courage to a people who had forgotten the taste of it. Kel stood nearby, listening with lowered head. Tivar turned to the Thari survivors. We will not return to who we were. We cannot. Peace without strength invited our destruction. Fear without action nearly finished it. Humanity has shown us that survival is not enough. He looked at Ambassador Vance. From this day forward, the Thari Dominion offers permanent alliance to the United Human Systems. Not as frightened petitioners. Not as rescued victims. As partners. Vance stepped forward. Her face carried grief and pride together. On behalf of humanity, she said, we accept. No cheer came. Instead, thousands of Thari lowered their heads. Thousands of humans placed hands over their hearts. Different gestures. Same meaning. Then Kel stepped forward carrying a small object. It was the command insignia recovered from the last data burst of the Resolute Dawn. Burned. Bent. Almost unrecognizable. He gave it to Vance. We found this in the transmission debris. Vance took it carefully. For the first time since Kel had met her, her composure broke. Only slightly. But enough. Thank you, she whispered. Kel said, we will build a memorial here. His name will be the first written. Vance closed her fingers around the insignia. Write all their names. We will. Not only humans. Kel looked at her. All of them, she said. Human. Thari. Every ship. Every crew. We won together. Kel nodded. Together. That word became the foundation of everything that followed. The Dominion changed. Not overnight. Civilizations never change that cleanly. But change came. Military academies reopened old studies once considered unnecessary. Engineering schools adopted human rapid design methods, though many instructors complained that human methods were bad for blood pressure. Thari children learned not only the history of the swarm, but the story of the rescue teams at Vether 9, the volunteers at the Nebula Edge, the engineers of Forge 3, and the final charge of the Resolute Dawn. Humanity changed too. The war forced scattered human systems into deeper cooperation. Old rivalries did not vanish, but they became smaller under the memory of what had been faced together. Human shipyards worked with Thari artisans. Thari medical science extended human lifespans. Human defensive planning reshaped Dominion borders. Joint fleets patrolled places both species had once feared to enter. And somewhere in every new treaty, every shared command, every rebuilt colony, there was one idea. No one stands alone. Months after the battle, Admiral Kell visited Vether 9. The colony was still wounded. Many cities remained ruins. Forests were blackened. Rivers were being cleaned. The sky still held the faint scars of orbital fire. But people had returned. Children played near temporary shelters. Engineers repaired transit lines. Human workers and Thari builders stood side by side, arguing over structural supports and meal schedules. A human medic taught Thari children how to throw a small rubber ball. They were terrible at it. The children loved it anyway. Kell walked to the remains of the school where human soldiers had pulled survivors from smoke. A plaque had been placed there. It listed the names of the human rescue team. Beside those names were the names of the Thari children saved. Not separate. Together. Ambassador Vance found him there. "I thought you might come here," she said. Kell looked at the plaque. "This was where I understood your people." Vance stood beside him. "What did you understand?" "That you are not what our files said." "Our files were probably not flattering. They were accurate, but incomplete." Vance smiled faintly. "That sounds like us." Kell watched the children chasing the ball. "We studied your wars. Your cruelty. Your divisions. We thought those things defined you. They are part of us." "Yes. But not all." "No." Kell turned to her. "I used to fear what humanity would do after the swarm was gone. And now? I still fear humanity." Vance raised an eyebrow. Kell continued. "But differently. I fear disappointing you. I fear becoming the kind of ally who lets your sacrifice become a story instead of a standard." Vance was quiet for a moment. "That is a heavy fear." "It should be." She looked back at the children. "Then carry it well." Kell clicked his mandibles softly. "I will." They stood together as the sun lowered over Vether 9. For the first time in 200 cycles, the horizon was not burning. It was healing. The galaxy heard the story in fragments at first. A desperate dominion. A human fleet. A destroyed swarm. An ancient civilization awakened and defeated. Many species did not believe it. Some called it propaganda. Some called it impossible. Some called it dangerous. But the evidence spread. Refugee recordings. Battle logs. Names of the dead. Images of human engineering platforms building shield arrays in active combat. Footage of Thari ships standing beside human vessels against enemies older than memory. One neutral historian wrote that the event marked the arrival of humanity as a true galactic power. A Thari scholar corrected him. "Humanity did not arrive as a power," she wrote. "Humanity arrived as an answer." On Earth, the story became something else. Not a conquest. Not a triumph over aliens. At least, not for those who had been there. For the families of the dead, it was grief. For soldiers, it was memory. For engineers, it was proof that impossible deadlines should still be questioned, even if they were sometimes met. For children, it became a tale told with wide eyes. The aliens asked for refuge, and we brought warships. Adults would correct them. And engineers. And doctors. And evacuation crews. And people willing to stand beside strangers. The children liked the warships part best. That was understandable. Years passed. The memorial in the Cygnus Nebula grew. At first, it was a simple ring of light around the dead star. Then came name walls. Then gardens sealed inside transparent domes. Then museums. Then listening halls where visitors could hear final transmissions from the battle. Kel visited every year. So did Vance. So did Richter, though she claimed she came only to inspect whether the memorial's power systems were being maintained correctly. Jekyll came with her, now Chief Engineer Jekyll of the Dominion Alliance fleet. He had adopted too many human habits, including drinking coffee, ignoring sleep recommendations, and calling dangerous inventions interesting. Richter was proud of him and denied it fiercely. On the 10th anniversary, a new class of joint warship was unveiled. The vessel was built with human armor principles and Thari energy architecture. It was strong and graceful, practical and beautiful, a symbol of what both species had become together. Its name was Unity of Dawn. Kel stood beside Vance as the ship powered up. General Thorne would have disliked the name, he said. Vance smiled. He disliked anything that sounded too poetic. What would he have named it? Probably something rude and simple. Kel made a thoughtful clicking sound. Then perhaps the official name is better. Definitely. They watched the ship leave dock. Kel said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had not sent the message?" Yes. And? Vance's voice was quiet. Then we would have found out too late. Kel looked at her. You were already watching the swarm. We were. You knew it would reach you one day. Yes. Then why wait for us to ask? Vance took a long breath. Because before your message, our leaders were divided. Some wanted to intervene. Some wanted more data. Some feared starting a war with an unknown threat. Your request changed the argument. It made the moral question impossible to avoid. Kel absorbed that. So we saved you too. Vance smiled. Yes, Admiral. You did. That pleased him more than he expected. The old fear between their species did not vanish completely. Trust is not a switch. It is a bridge built plank by plank. There were disputes. Border arguments. Trade conflicts. Cultural misunderstandings. Human media sometimes called Thari too cautious. Thari commentators sometimes called humans too loud, too fast, too fond of explosions. Both were correct. But when danger appeared, the alliance held. A pirate kingdom learned this when it attacked a Thari medical convoy and found a human strike group waiting behind the moon. A rogue Dominion faction learned it when it tried to seize human technology and was stopped by Thari loyalists before humanity even had to respond. A machine plague near the Outer Rim learned it when human engineers and Thari code singers trapped it inside a false network and convinced it that it had already conquered the galaxy. The Alliance became famous not because it never argued. It became famous because it argued like family and fought like one body. And in every academy, new officers studied the First War. They studied the fear of the Thari Council. They studied the arrival of Ambassador Vance. They studied the mobile engineering platforms. They studied the swarm's patterns. They studied the shield breaker. They studied the diversion. They studied the ancient fleet. They studied Thorne's final charge. But the best instructors always paused at the same point. They told students that strategy mattered. Weapons mattered. Engineering mattered. Courage mattered. But none of those were the heart of the story. The heart was the first answer. We are coming. Not we will consider. Not we require payment. Not this is not our problem. We are coming. 3 words. A promise. A warning. A definition. Centuries later, when the Dominion and humanity had become so close that young people from both species served on the same ships without thinking it strange, the story remained. It changed in small ways, as stories do. Some versions made the human fleet larger. Some made General Thorne taller. Some made Chief Engineer Richter build the shield breaker with one hand while the platform was on fire. Richter, still alive thanks to Thari medicine and human stubbornness, denied this. Then admitted the platform had been on fire a little. But the core stayed true. The Thari asked for refuge. Humanity arrived ready for war. Not because humans loved war, but because they understood something the older species had forgotten. Peace is not protected by wishing. Mercy is not defended by hiding. Hope is not preserved by retreat. Sometimes the kindest answer in the universe is a shield line. Sometimes compassion arrives wearing armor. Sometimes the species with the darkest history becomes the first to step into the dark for someone else. And sometimes, when monsters come to consume the innocent, humanity does not ask whether victory is guaranteed. Humanity asks where to stand. The final record of General Thorne was recovered many years after the battle. It came from a damaged backup core found inside a fragment of the Resolute Dawn's outer hull. For decades, technicians believed the data was too corrupted to restore. Then a joint team of human and Thari engineers recovered 12 seconds of audio. The recording was played only once in the Grand Assembly before being added to the Memorial Archive. Thorne's voice was rough, surrounded by alarms. "Tell them we were not afraid." A pause. Then a correction. "No. Tell them we were afraid, and we went anyway." That became the line carved beneath his name. Not because it made humanity seem invincible. Because it made humanity true. Kel stood before that carving on the day it was revealed. He was very old by then. His scales had dulled. His movements had slowed. But his eyes remained clear. Beside him stood children from both species. A young human girl asked, "Did you know him?" Kel looked at the name. Yes. Was he a hero? Kel thought carefully. Humans were strange about that word. They used it often, then rejected it when it came too close. "He was a soldier," Kel said. The girl frowned. "Is that different?" "Sometimes. Sometimes not." A young Thari child asked, "Were you scared in the battle?" Kel clicked softly. "More than I can explain." "But you stayed." Kel turned toward the stars beyond the memorial glass. "Yes." "Why?" He looked at the children. "Because humanity taught us that fear is not an order." The children grew quiet. Kel continued. "Fear may speak. It may warn. It may shake your hands and tighten your breath. But it does not command you unless you kneel to it." The human girl looked at Thorne's name. "And he did not kneel?" "No," Kel said. "He did not." The child smiled. "Good." Kel smiled too, in the small way his species allowed. "Yes. Good." Not long after, Kel recorded his final message for the Alliance archives. He sat in a simple room overlooking the rebuilt capital of Vether Prime. The city below was brighter than it had been in his youth. Human towers stood beside Thari spires. Markets carried both languages. Ships rose toward orbit under a shared flag. Kel looked older than history. But his voice was steady. "When I first saw humanity, I saw danger. I was not wrong. But I did not yet understand that danger has direction. A blade in the hand of a murderer is terror. A blade in the hand of a defender is hope." He paused. "The humans came to us with blades. They also came with open hands." Another pause. "We asked them for refuge. We thought refuge meant a place to hide. Humanity taught us that refuge can also mean a line held against the dark. It can mean engines arriving over a frightened world. It can mean engineers building miracles from scrap and pressure. It can mean soldiers entering fire because someone inside is still alive." Kel's eyes softened. "For 200 cycles, we believed survival was the best we could hope for. Humanity disagreed. They brought us victory, but more importantly, they brought us back to ourselves." He leaned closer to the recorder. "If any future generation hears this, remember the lesson. Do not worship humanity. They would hate that. Do not copy them blindly. They are often unreasonable, loud, impatient, and far too willing to test machines before the paint dries. A faint smile. But learn from them. When help is needed, go. When fear speaks, listen, then choose. When evil calls itself order, answer clearly. When someone asks for refuge, do not only offer walls. His final words were later taught across worlds. Bring your hands. Bring your minds. Bring your courage. And if the darkness has teeth, bring warships. The recording ended there. The alliance kept growing. The swarm never returned. The ancient creators, once believed extinct after the battle, were later discovered in hidden vaults across forgotten space. Some had been sleeping. Some had uploaded minds into cold machines. Some had watched everything. When they were found, many expected humanity to demand revenge. The Thari expected it too. They remembered the dead. They remembered the burning worlds. They remembered the ancient voice calling murder mercy. But humanity surprised them again. There were trials. There was justice. There were prisons, reparations, and truth hearings that lasted decades. But there was no genocide. No cleansing. No grand punishment of an entire people for the crimes of their rulers. When Kel asked Vance why, she gave him a very human answer. Because if we become them to defeat them, then they still win. That answer became another pillar of the alliance. Strength without cruelty. Memory without endless hatred. Justice without surrendering the soul. It was not always easy. Nothing meaningful ever was. But the alliance tried. That, perhaps, was the most human thing of all. Not perfection. Not purity. Not endless wisdom. Trying. Trying after failure. Trying after shame. Trying after loss. Trying when the math looked bad. Trying when the stars were cold. Trying when an alien voice said, "You cannot win." Trying anyway. And because humans tried, the Thari learned to try again too. On the 100th anniversary of First Contact, Vether Prime held a ceremony in the same council chamber where Tivar had once ordered the message sent. The chamber had changed. The central display now showed not only Dominion stars, but human systems too. The old carvings of peace remained, but new ones had been added. Ships. Hands clasped across species. The Cygnus Nebula. The words, "We are coming," written in both languages. A young Thari counselor stood where Tivar had stood. A human admiral stood beside her. The galaxy was not safe. It never had been. New threats moved beyond known space. Strange signals had appeared near the rim. Old powers stirred. Young species rose. Fear remained a familiar visitor. But the chamber no longer belonged to fear. The counselor addressed the assembly. Once, in this room, our ancestors debated whether humanity was too dangerous to trust. A soft laugh moved through the crowd. The human admiral smiled. The counselor continued. They were dangerous. They still are. But danger is not the same as evil. Power is not the same as conquest. A violent past does not forbid a noble future. She looked toward the display. We asked for refuge. Humanity brought warships. At first, we thought that meant they misunderstood us. Her voice warmed. They understood better than we did. The human admiral stepped forward. And when the greater threat came, the Thari did not run. The room fell silent. They stood with us. They bled with us. They taught us that courage can be learned in an instant when the heart is ready. The counselor and admiral turned toward the assembly together. That is the alliance, they said. Not human. Not Thari. Both. Beyond the chamber windows, ships waited in orbit. Some were human-built. Some Thari. Most were something new. Strong and graceful. beautiful and brutal. Ready. And across the stars, in stations, colonies, academies, and quiet homes, people still told the story. They told it when children were afraid. They told it when leaders hesitated. They told it when disasters came and someone asked whether helping was worth the risk. They told it because every civilization needs a story that reminds it who it wants to be. The story always began with a question. What do you do when strangers ask for refuge? And the answer always came like engines over a burning world. You go. You bring healers. You bring builders. You bring soldiers if soldiers are needed. You bring everything you are. And if the enemy waiting in the dark believes kindness is weakness, you teach it the oldest human lesson in the stars. Kindness is not weakness. Mercy is not surrender. And when humanity comes to help, it does not come empty-handed. It comes with generals. It comes with engineers. It comes with warships. And it comes to stand beside you until the dark learns to fear the light.